Hello, lovely people. Welcome back to the Distinct and Jovial podcast. My name is Dom, and I am joined once again by my wonderful co-host, Jerry. How you doing, Jerry?
I'm fine, thank you, Dom. Greetings.
Oh, yes. This might give you a bit of a clue about the theme and topic as we come into October, or the spookiest month of the year. We'll do the normal kind of spiel that makes sure that we're all covered. So it's not the 23rd of September because we've had to move this. It's the 24th of September. It's 3:10 on a Saturday afternoon, not our normal time. I'm a bit more awake.
I am as well, actually. This feels a bit odd.
Maybe we should do this more regular. I don't know.
Maybe we should do this pissed.
Yeah. No, don't, because Swanee has already suggested that we do an alcohol.
I know, that's a bad move.
I don't think that it would be a bad move.
No, that's a really bad move.
This is episode number 16. And as always, all of our opinions that are expressed on this podcast are strictly our own and don't represent the company or companies that we work for. Company in this case, particularly. I haven't got a guest to register that. And we will just say we have a little bit more limited time to record this one. I've had there's no other word, there's no other phrase, but what a week, Jerry.
What a week.
What a week.
I don't even know where to start with it, Dom.
No.
And do you?
No, I don't. I think by Friday morning I wanted to just cry. I think that was probably the easiest way to put it. I think I did at some point, to be honest.
Don't blame me.
But so this podcast, we're going to go into a bit more. Well, as I said, it's going to be our spooky month one. And this is everything that. This is Jerry's podcast. This is everything that Jerry wanted to talk about or discuss. And I, not in a pressured way, but in a he is the expert out of the two of us, and I'm expecting like some really good things. So I'll let you kind of introduce what we're doing, Jerry.
Oh, sorry, was I supposed to prep for this? Okay, so this will give you an idea of how this podcast is going to go. I've got a couple of tabs open, and whilst you were talking there for the last minute, I couldn't find you. I was frantically clicking on all the tabs, going, "Oh, I've lost Dom. I can't see him." I actually started to panic.
Well, you maintained yourself very well, so you were full swan mode, as I refer to it, completely on it. But inside you're going,
Yeah, but I was a swan with a gammy leg. To be fair,
just going in circles. Is that the way that it is?
Something like that. Yeah.
The standard Distinct Jovial kind of off a tangent.
Yeah. So I'm not going to get too heavy on this. I mean, it will be heavy, so it will be distinct, but there will be joviality in here as well. So I'm going to crack jokes and things. But we've got some pretty deep topics, some heavy topics to discuss. Although, no, seriously, was I supposed to have prepared for this? No, I'm joking. So today's episode actually is going to focus on two things. So to set the scene, we've got two things that I'm fascinated by. One that something I've been fascinated by ever since I was a child, and I will kick off the actual discussion with what it is that actually sparked my interest, and it's the interest in UFOs or UAPs as they're now known as.
So there's a whole what UAP stands for.
Yeah, so UFOs are unidentified flying object, and then recently the US Navy and intelligence communities decided to call it UAPs, which stands for, and I can't really say the last word of this very well, but unidentified aerial phenomenon. Eminem. So it's for me, it's an absolutely fascinating topic, but I just want to set the scene on this, and also the other topic which we're going to cover, which is all to do with, and I think I mentioned this, didn't I, Dom, about my personal experiences of, what do you call it, paranormal spirits, that kind of thing.
You mentioned before we started actually recording spirituality, and I was like,
yes,
I think he means like spirituality rather than religious spirituality in this particular case. But I was like, I'll let it fly until we get into the podcast, and I need to make it clear. I need to be which one are we talking about? No, I'm pretty sure you mean that one. Yes, and we've discussed it before.
We have.
In like a brief stint, and we said that we were going to discuss it again in a future podcast. And ta-da, future podcast.
So yeah, I haven't done any notes. I didn't realize I was supposed to prep. No, I'm joking. So. But I want to do this. I want to approach this from a different angle. So, for all you people watching and all the listeners out there, so Dom and I were talking about this literally just before we started recording, and I just wanted to give the heads up, and to Dom, and I want to give the heads up to all of you, which is I'm not going to start picking out, UFO incidents, for example, and going into all of the minute detail of it. If you want to know more, so if this has whet your appetite and you want to know more, there's a ton, and I mean a ton, of information out there. You can get books on things like Betty and Barney Hill's Close Encounter. You can, the Rendlesham Forest Incident, Roswell. I mean, there's just you'll be buried in information. There's a whole bunch of stuff online. Podcasts. Joe Rogan's particularly interested in it. And he's had a number of people on his show who are professional ufologists and things. So, I'm not going to start going into the details of those things. By all means, go and do your own research if you're interested. I want to approach this from a slightly different aspect, because the aspect of this which people don't tend to spend enough time on, don't explore, is the things around, why is this happening, and why are governments responding to it in the way that they're responding to it, and then trying to extrapolate that out into some kind of theory as to, well, what could this be? Because the obvious debunking theories are always a bit crap, to be honest. So, it's a weather balloon. It's, some, I don't know. It's like the Northern Lights, or it's a shooting star, and you think, well, no, it isn't. You've got people, for example, you've got U.S. Air Force pilots. Very experienced, been in the Air Force for 20 plus years, that are saying, I chased this object. So the USS Nimitz, pretty sure it was the Nimitz, but it was the incident that happened over 10 years ago, where which has now come out. They've released footage of the Tic Tac UFO. So
Tic Tac UFO,
yeah, because it's in the shape of a Tic Tac. But you've got very experienced fighter pilots that their job. They're highly trained, and their job is to be able to identify the difference between something that's a friendly aircraft and hostile aircraft, something which is a difference between a fighter jet and a 747, difference between a weather balloon and weather phenomenon. So the fact that they're testifying you've got politicians, you've got policemen, you've got people of real standing. Who have testified, who've come out and told their stories. So, there's something going on, and I'd like to explore the theories behind what that could be. So that's what this is about, just to set the scene.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, because I've done as much as thinking as I can this week. Obviously, with certain circumstances for myself this week being a little bit stressful, but. You can put it down to like one basic question, right? I'm going to pick a specific example, right? Area 51 exists, right? We know it exists, right? It's there. But none of us know the purpose of it, right? And regardless of what your opinion is based upon, whether you believe, aliens, spirits, ghosts, SpongeBob SquarePants being a natural character that's to life, regardless of where on the spectrum you believe and how much you believe in terms of like science and mythology, right? Most of these, I can go a bit into the mythology and that might go a bit off track, but if we stick with the Area 51, regardless of what you believe in, that building exists and it is looking at something and it has found some things. And I think based upon, specifically what Jerry has just said there, and specifically what we've kind of discussed is, you can try and debunk and prove specific, like, individual options, and some are more practical and more, like, well-renowned than others. But Area 51 still exists and it's still doing a thing. So I think that's kind of the discussion, is like, yes, but what? But why? Etc. And those types of questions, I think, are possibly, I think what you're alluding to, Jerry, but are more the questions that I like to answer. He's right. It's like, that's great, that
exactly.
exists, but what does that mean for us? What does that actually,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, exactly that. What are the implications? What does that mean? And
Yeah.
where are the links?
Yeah, and mythology. Just on a quick side tangent, because that's just the way this podcast works. And
I
that's
don't
the way
know
my
if that
brain
is a
works.
side tangent. Actually, I think it's directly relevant.
In a sense, right? So if you look at mythology and you look at the creatures that are usually surrounded around in mythology, anything from like the unicorn, the national animal of Scotland, for those that didn't know, to things like dragons and minotaurs, centaurs, things like that, and they always kind of go. The human brain is very creative, but there are certain things that you kind of go, you need somewhere to start, right? So something similar must have existed, and you've seen some of the weird and wacky creatures that are genuinely on the earth, and some of them are fantastic and some of them are terrible. And I think anything to do with mythology is there's while it may not be 100% truth, because the way that the human psyche works, it things deviate. I think there's always an element of truth in something, right? There's something must have sparked that, and that's why I think anything to do with, how to call it, your feelings, your gut instinct that around maybe things like haunted houses or anything from like I saw a dragon, blah, right? There is still an element of truth in that matter, unless it's very recently and that's proven that the person was on LSD. That's a different matter, right? Okay, so yeah, and that's kind of like the premise, I think, for what we're planning to discuss and how we're going to go into it.
So, just going back to your point about Area 51. So, I've done loads of research on it. I know definitively what that. So that was founded on testing out different pizza toppings, and they tried some crazy ones, like pineapple.
Pineapple.
And I remember at the time they said, we must never let this get out.
Blueberries and sausage on pizza.
Don't let this escape the lab. But it's happened. Now we've got pineapple on pizza and blueberry and sausage. And these are the kind of hideous experiments to carry out. No, it's you're right. It does exist, and that's all linked to what they call skunk works, which is all of the research that was done by the aerospace companies that they came up with the F-117, the that fighter that basically fighter bomber that just looks like a bat. It's like a flying disc.
Oh yeah.
And
the stealth bomber
and things.
Yeah,
like that. So they came up with that technology, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
It's fine.
Where, how, when, what?
Well,
why?
This
right.
and look, by the way, I am going to scratch the surface on stuff, and this is why I'm going down I'm interested in exploring the angle that I want to explore, because if you start going into the details, we literally, this podcast would last for days. So, for example, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime was fascinated. They were fascinated with the occult. They absolutely firmly believed in alien intelligence and alien technologies, and they conducted experiments for anti-gravity is what they were looking at doing. I mean, nothing was off the books for them. It's if you that again, that's another area that you read about, and that's going back to the late 30s and 40s, and you think, what the hell? Because they just didn't rule anything out. So I mean, there are so many topics, but let me start right from the top. So, what sparked my interest in this? Well, if you cast your mind back to, I think it was 1977. I think it was. That was when Steven Spielberg released the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now, what was interesting is Steven Spielberg also came up with E.T. I'm pretty sure Steven Spielberg did E.T., wasn't it? So,
yeah,
he did E.T., but then he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And what was interesting about that film was that Have you seen it actually, Dom? Before I go any further,
I haven't seen Close Encounters with the Third Kind. I know of it. And I've just very quickly, yes, before we get slowed, E.T. was Steven Spielberg.
okay. So that's a film worth watching because it is incredible, even when you watch it today, because of the. So it's basically about. It's about this guy who's I think he's a like an engineer that works on the American equivalent of the national grid, and he ends up having a close encounter with the UFO, and the way that they film it. I mean, it's just incredible. And actually, Steven Spielberg brought on board a gentleman by the name of J. Allen Hynek, and Hynek's an astronomer who actually was pulled in to help with Project Blue Book, and Project Blue Book was the government sort of official investigation into UFOs back in 1948, I think it was, when he started doing that. So Spielberg wanted a professional to come in and support him with that film. And if you take a look at that, if you watch that film, you just think, whoa, okay, there's some serious technical consulting that took place there. He actually plays a cameo part in that. But when I watched that film, I just thought, what? I don't know what I've just watched. It's incredible. And that's what kicked it all off, because I kind of think, well, you're right, Dom, that you know, the humans are very imaginative creatures. But actually, what Steven Spielberg produced and what some people say is that film came about. They reckon that film came about at that time because the government was keen to kind of soften people up to the idea of the fact that there are UFOs and this is potentially what they would look like and what alien life would look like. And it was all based on all of the investigations that took place in Project Blue Book and all the stuff that Hynek was involved in. So I find that film fascinating in itself. That's what triggered it. And for all of you listeners and people watching this who haven't seen that, watch that film. Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
You're aware of my history of having not seen any film practically known to man. I've not seen Aliens. I've not seen Predator.
Predator, The Rock. You're still, still on the list. This is another one to add to the list now. What if we just take the whole subject of UFOs and let's just start with that, with UAPs. What are your thoughts on that, Dom?
So I think this is your point at question one. Are they like alien activity, parallel, or man-made? And it's interesting because we did a bit about the metaverse. We've done a bit about what was it? What was the one that we did? The Mandela effect.
Yes,
didn't we?
Yes.
And for those that haven't seen, I don't know what the Mandela effect is. For example, the end of Looney Tunes is Tunes, Tunes, not Tunes, Toons. And everybody goes, well, right, that makes no sense. But that is exactly what it is. And that's the Mandela effect. No, there is something, right? And I'm very much a man of science. I believe in kind of, how do I set the scene on my beliefs? I generally believe kind of in like, the science and things that we've proven. However, there are always limitations to the human brain. The brain can only be so intelligent because it named itself.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, if you think about it, right? You aren't like if you can't really have a brain transplant because your brain is what contains your personality. You would never have a brain transplant. You'd have a body transplant because you transition your brain from one body to another, which means you're transitioning your personality. Assuming we could do the procedure without damaging the brain in a way that would alter your personality and stuff like that, right? And the brain is still made up of neurons, electrons, etc. And I believe that there are that's kind of fact and things like that, and I like to be able to prove that. However, I believe that there are limitations and there are things out there that we won't understand, which means that I can't explain what that means to me because fundamentally we do not have the processing power as a human to understand it. Which means that absolutely, I believe there is a realm of possibility that there is things. I mean, you always say aliens now, and the reason why you say aliens is not because aliens are that specifically green Martian. Aliens just means something that's not of Earth, from the actual definition. So, short answer, it's alien activity. It's not. There are stuff that happens within Earth's atmosphere, on the ground on Earth, that is not human related activity. You could even go as far as to say, like, when you look at the creation. Now, we generally know like how molecules, and atoms have formed themselves from the Big Bang, or the Big Bloom, as it should really be called, Big Expansion. It didn't make a noise because there was no atoms to make a noise, which is why the Big Bang always sounds ridiculous to me. But that could be classed as alien activity. That thought process in terms of like the fact that something is beyond our either understanding, control, or something like that. And I love listening to people like Brian Cox. I absolutely adore kind of looking at the telescope pictures that are coming back from them. Can't think, just the sudden telescope name has just completely escaped me. That was recent telescope.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's just gone from my head. It's really annoying.
There's Hubble, and then there's.
I'm
going to look it up.
I'm
just going to get there first.
I'm literally just typing in space telescope. James Webb.
James Webb. That's it.
Yes. Like, and they found out what the sound of a black hole makes. Like, that's cool, right? But that's alien. It's not something that happens within Earth. So, are there ships running around that we've not made? Yes. Like, we didn't make birds. They fly around. They're just identified. But all the identification means is gone. We know it's that. There's stuff out there that we've just not identified. We've not identified even. I think we've explored something like 12% of the ocean. There's 88% of the ocean or something ridiculous that we've just not explored, that you don't know. And is there an element of like man-made as well? And I'm going to go a little. I said we weren't going to take too long on each one, but Jerry's written a note on this, listeners, and it says, "Are UAPs?" I keep reading that as OAPs, but that's what throws me off. Right, a result of alien activity from a parallel universe or man-made. Right, and the answer to that question is yes. Right, there's no like there is alien activity that is happening. Right, in my opinion. Right, there is. I believe in some sense, some sort of parallel universe, or at least metaverse, in terms of like there are parallels and crossovers and stuff that we don't understand. We would not have come up with that concept on our own. And are there some things that are man-made and completely bogus? Absolutely. Yeah, there are absolutely times where it is just somebody being an idiot with a drone, right? That's just the way. And that's the way
Probably
that I think
an
about it. Probably an OAP, yes.
Is that an OAP, UAP?
Yeah.
I think so.
OAPs are not high on my list this week, so... There you go.
What calls us UAPs? OAPs.
Yeah.
Ah, we've solved it. We've solved it.
We've solved it. It's the old man with the stick.
So, might as well hang up. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, everyone, thank you. I didn't realise we were going to crack it in how long? How long did that take us? 24 minutes. You are a genius, Dom. UAPs are caused by OAPs with drones.
I am going to title this. I'm going to title this podcast "Solving UFOs in Less than 30 Minutes."
It's taken decades. People have devoted their whole lives to this, but we cracked it. Well, you cracked it in 24 minutes. OAPs with a drone. Oh yeah. Oh, brilliant.
We were worried that this podcast wouldn't turn out to be jovial. I think this is
you
us
have
two.
to sprinkle the jovial. You have to. I don't know where to go from there, really. Genuinely, I am so impressed.
Well, I assume. Do you disagree or agree? I suppose is the first question, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said, because it's there's stuff that people have seen that are man-made, and they've thought, well, I can't explain what that is, so it's unexplained, right? So it's unidentified. That's the whole point of it. And then there's stuff which, I mean, no one knows what they are. So for example, that that footage that was released in last year of what the US Navy captured. No one can explain that. It was captured on multiple radars. It was seen by multiple pilots. Does that mean that they're not man-made? I don't know, but you've got experts that have viewed that footage that have said, well, there's nothing man-made that would be able to move, in the way that object moved, and to be able to survive those kind of G-forces and things. So we haven't got technology like that. Doesn't mean that technology doesn't exist on Earth, or no one else has come up with it. But I mean, they're saying if they had to pick something, they would say it's probably not of this Earth.
Yeah,
just because of the way that the thing performs. So yes, I agree. I agree with everything that you said.
And I think that's the, I was about to say beauty or the unsettlingness. I don't know how it probably ranges between both, in that humans naturally want to be able to account for things, right? The OCD is performed. It's formed from the fact that, like, generally we like patterns. Like, that's why we like those things. Like, we like videos that are oddly satisfying, right? And I'm a sucker for them as well. Like, I'm not saying I'm not human, although some people probably have said so. Right? But I think, like, what's beautiful and terrifying about it is that we don't understand it, which is why I think some people become very skeptical. Those that are like, I must understand, like that, the brain's hunger or thirst to go, I understand this stuff, right? And then there are people that are a little bit more like, well, maybe I don't need to understand everything, and maybe it could be something completely different. And I think that's where you get the spectrum of, like, or people giving their opinions on things that sometimes just aren't meant to be identified.
Absolutely, but so following on that point, I think there are some people who are so skeptical that they literally go out of their way to try and explain something that they can't explain, which then inadvertently makes them very close-minded. Because they just won't accept any other theory, just because it's not within their comprehension. So they have to try and explain everything away within their comprehension. So, it's this is why I'm fascinated by this topic. Absolutely fascinated by it. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things and just ask for your views on this as well. So, about Roswell.
Yes.
I mean, everybody knows about Roswell. So 1947, highlight is that you had a UFO that crashed in a ranch in New Mexico, and officers from the Roswell Army Airfield went to the site. So it was discovered by a farmer who then reported it. Interestingly enough, he didn't know what to do. Just that he saw this debris which looked like metal and rubber, and it was just odd. He couldn't identify any of it, and then he finally reported it. And again, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but actually on the 8th of July 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release stating that they had recovered a flying disc. So they actually formally issued that statement, and then they quickly retracted that statement and said, "No, hang about, whoa. Did we say flying disc? No. What we meant was it's just a weather balloon. Nothing to see here." And it wasn't until I think it was 1994, the United States Air Force published a report identifying that crashed object was actually a nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul. So, but they didn't report that at the time. So they decided to wait. Decades later, they decided to publish that. And actually, it was around that time when, loads of people saw flashing lights, flying saucers that were actually reported in that part of America. And the, for me, the reason why I've brought up the whole thing around Roswell is, believe what you will, fine. But I'm more interested in, why did the Army decide to announce that it was a flying disc? They they admitted they didn't actually know what it was, that it was unidentified. And they were willing and happy to give that information to the local press that printed it, and then they backtracked. And I just find that really weird. Because
and I suppose it's not so much like, we're not here to kind of go, yes, it was aliens, no, it was humans, right? Regardless of which way it is, and I think the way that the way that this one's been, I think this is the most, I think it's the most thoroughly exhaustive, investigated and debunked UFO or UAP or OAP myth, right? And regardless of like what you think, I think when you look at it, it's like, yeah, but why? Okay, you've got Project Mogul was testing nuclear stuff, so that's probably something they pretty wanted. They probably wanted to cover up, right? But what, that's still.
So just say it's a weather balloon.
yeah. Then they said it was a weather balloon, right? And actually, if you read into like the Project Mogul, the balloons that they used were a bit more than weather balloons, right? And then you've got all of these like different kind of eyewitness accounts and like the fact that stuff was found and things like that. And then you get into the media phenomenon. So, even like Roswell, New Mexico, obviously where it's, the Roswell Incident in Roswell, New Mexico, their official seal is a little green man, right? It's
Love it.
As well as I'm fascinated, and this is where my study and love of like the psychology comes into it, as well as like understanding like, right, why do all this? Like, we found the disc. I'll retract that statement. We found a weather balloon. Okay, but why did you do the first statement? Right, that makes no sense. But also, okay, but then why did Roswell go, I know what we do. We're going to make our official seal a green man. Like, it's that whole like media phenomenon about this that's just absolutely incredibly fascinating and in some cases hilarious.
And it's that psychology, and this is why I'd love to know what is behind that. So it's almost like, you and I go and I don't know, we go and rob a bank, and then I go around telling everybody, hey, Dom and I robbed a bank, and then you come along suddenly and say, hang about, you shouldn't really be telling everybody that we robbed a bank, because like that's not really the done thing. No one's really supposed to know about that. And then they go, oh crap, no, we didn't rob a bank. We we opened up a savings account. Did you? What?
Yeah.
Yes, and it wasn't a bank; it was a building society.
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly it.
Do you know what I mean? It's like
it.
So clearly, you've got to take that first story and say, well, shit. Actually, it was unidentified. The debris, which people have described as like metal, a type of metal that they've never seen before, with strange sort of hieroglyphic writing on it, which I'll come to in another incident as well. So that fascinates me, because I think that was the start of the whole standard procedure by the government of anything else that happens like that. We need to, we basically can't screw it up like we did with Roswell. Like, we can't have people going and saying, "Yeah, oh my God, there was a flying disc and there were these alien bodies," and because that was another thing. They said that they recovered alien life form, from that wreckage, and one of them was still alive. But then they've gone and retracted all of that, and just said, "Oh no, it's a weather balloon." Why would you go and make all of that up? There's something about facts later on, which I'll come to, because skeptics will come up with this reason, that reason, but then. There was an famous incident took place in Australia where a whole bunch of school children, I think there were only over 30 school children, witnessed a UFO basically landing in the field behind the school. You had multiple children witness this thing from ages, I think it was 6 to 9, and they told the teachers about it, and some of the teachers saw it, and they all went, right, why would kids lie about that? And this happened like in the middle of the day. And
kids are unreliable in a beautiful way. Like a kid can be totally honest, and a kid will totally make something up for no reason. Right? They're not. They don't have the same. Especially around sort of 6 to 9, the psyche of a child is that they haven't developed certain bits and pieces, that it means that they will like just they do things.
No filter.
Yeah, there's no filter. Like
Yeah.
you've all been there. You've sat down with a child and the child's gone, "Wow, you're really fat," and you're like, "I'm sorry." Like no adult, because they haven't developed. They basically haven't developed the guilt feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no way you can force a child to do something like generally, and if you could like on one, like there's no way one child, if it was one child, you'd be like, maybe they made it up. But when it's a bunch, a collection, you've got to kind of go, well, they can't all be in on it, right? That's not how children work.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, when the children said that to me, I said, no, I'm just big boned. So there.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm sure you've been brutally cut down by your daughter. Even though, although that still probably happens at 18. You're not going out wearing that.
Yes. What the hell do you look like, Dad? So yeah. There are other things. You've got that whole the Phoenix lights, where there was a UFO that was it was massive. That's going back to 1997, and thousands of people across Arizona saw this thing. There was an unidentified flying object, basically in the shape of a V, and this thing was bloody huge. So there's and this was famous because there was the governor, the then Arizona governor, a guy called, and I love this name. So we need to add this to your list of names. Fife Symington.
What a name!
What a name! What a name!
I'm not. I'm a slight tangent. I'm not a massive fan of America in general at the moment. The way that it conducts politics, the way that it conducts its social issues, the way that it's built up. A lot of things I dislike about America, but they do give a good name.
Fife Symington. So if I was to change my name by deed poll, I would change it to Fife Symington.
I've just looked him up. It's his first name was not Fife, but his name is John Fife Symington III.
There you go. Even better.
That's great. What a name.
Fife Symington
III.
Love it. The third.
Wow.
So, yeah, this guy's a legend. So he went and he did a press release. He did a press statement because there were so many reports of this, and people were actually genuinely alarmed. And he did this press statement very famously when he said, we've caught the culprit, and he got one of his staff to come in wearing this big alien head, dressed up as an alien with this giant alien head, and he went, and like it was in handcuffs, and he went, here you go. And he really tried to make light of it. And actually people were incensed. They were outraged. They're like, how dare you little shit. We know what we saw. And you're just taking the piss. And do you know what? It was interesting because at the time he absolutely got hammered for that, because literally thousands of people saw that. Later on, he actually said, well, yeah, I saw it as well. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was ex-military. And he said that when he saw this, it was humongous, this UFO. He reckoned it was potentially about 6,000 feet in length, width. I mean, that kind of dimension, 6,000 feet in length. I mean, it's huge. It cast a shadow over Phoenix as it was going over. Yeah. And it was slow moving.
Yeah. He was a captain, and he
was a captain.
Yeah,
there you
fought
go.
in the Vietnam War, and he has a Bronze Star to his name.
Right. So he's not some Looney Tunes. He's somebody that's. I mean, he's an adult. He's seen some things in his time. Why would he then go and put his reputation on the line by eventually then coming out and saying this? And actually, he did apologize to everybody in the end. And what's interesting is that that's right. He was a former Air Force officer, and he actually said that this does not resemble any man-made object that I've ever seen. and it was certainly not high altitude flares, which is what the US Air Force said. There were some exercises taking place with the A-10 tank busters, and they spit out the flares as they do like sharp turn maneuvers and practice all of that. And he said, no, there's no way it's that. So again, we've got this, as you'll see, we've just got this continuous pattern now of people saying, well, I know what I saw. You've got reputable people. There were police officers and people in the emergency services that night, for example, that saw what they saw. How can you miss a 6,000-foot long object that casts a shadow over Phoenix as it's passing by? And yet there's all of this deniability. So I suppose if you take things like that and Roswell, what are your thoughts on, what if you had to have somebody said, look, Dom, just have one guess. Right? You had to write your idea down and put it into the idea jar of what you think is going on. And if you then take into account, so you got Roswell, you've got a crashed saucer, and they said that there was witnesses that said there was alien life on board, so little humanoid creatures, literally about 3 feet high with massive heads. And you think, as strange and as bizarre and maybe even laughable as that sounds, you've got that. You've got this, where you've got an object that's about 6,000 feet long, slowly moving over Phoenix. Thousands of people seeing it. It's casting a shadow as it goes over. And you put all this together and you think, well, what would be your guess if you had to put something into the ideas jar?
The ideas jar, for that full Kobe. It's interesting because, there's a lot, if you actually read into it, there's a lot of debunking things. And I'm always a bit more I'm usually on the more skeptical side of things, always have been. And I'm not a very good ideas man. I'm an editor rather than an inventor. I always, and science will go some way to kind of say, yes, it was this. No, it was this. Right. And regardless, I think I still hang on to your original point at the beginning of this podcast. Like, that's fine, but why are people so cagey about it, right? If it's such a simple explanation, it was flares. If it was a weather balloon. If it's such a simple information, why are documents classified? Why are people doing that? Which leads me to believe that there was something that somebody doesn't want to reveal. Now, whether that is alien, man-made, parallel universe, doesn't, like, to me is a bit like, well, until someone I'm one of those people that's comfortable with unidentified, right? I'm very happy with kind of go, it was not identifiable, and honestly, unless it was going to fall on my face, 6,000 meters fall on my face would be quite painful. My life is stressful enough then to kind of give myself like brain power to things that I don't. That I could potentially, because of my belief, potentially be something I could never understand. But it's that if a team have said that it's something so simple, why are the documents classified? Why can't we read into it? Why are the investigations closed? Why this? Why that? Why this? Right? Because that actually fuels it worse. It fuels this conspiracy theories worse. It fuels, people's, mistrust of authority. And I don't like the word authority, but mistrust in places that you should. Like, the government doesn't have authority. The government has, needs to have the ability to. I'm trying to think of the kind of phrasing, but it's not about like crushing the people. The point is, it's a democracy, and that you should be able to express your opinion. And the government is there purely to kind of support order, to ensure that it's not complete chaos, right? But as soon as and it comes back to one of my key points, and I use this at work quite a lot, is that you can't build trust and accountability unless you've got open and honest. You can't until you've got open and honesty, right? And as soon as you're not open or not honest, in which case a lot of these things you're not, then the public are going to think all kinds of crazy things. Like, some of these two particular incidents, they could be completely they could be the weather balloon and flares, right? They absolutely could. I'm not saying they are. They absolutely could. But the fact that the documents are classified, so nobody can tell, right? That's the bit that's weird to me, and why I really like the angle that you kind of put at the beginning of the podcast. And then there may be a bunch of other incidents that people just go, oh yeah, that was a weather balloon, right? That they believe that. And that could have been something, that could have been something completely alien, that the aliens were so clever and so much more intelligent than us. So they went, right, to make sure that we aren't spotted, like, let's make sure it is a weather balloon. We look like a weather balloon. And then we don't even talk about things. We don't, and then you don't talk about things that you don't know about. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, there's probably millions of incidents that you just don't know because they could be significantly more intelligent, or they could be completely, everything alien could be literally the dumbest creatures on Earth. Or no, not on Earth, the dumbest creatures in our universe. And we are the most intelligent creatures in our universe, which is an entirely possibility. And then you get into like this whole parallel universe thing about like what would happen on an equal and opposite Earth. Have we made good decisions in terms of our environment? Have we made good decisions in terms of, in a parallel universe? We haven't here, trust me. And without going into politics,
you're right.
You've got that kind of element about that. So in these two particular cases, I don't have a significant opinion on what they are because they've been debunked and investigated both ways. But it's that kind of, why is everything kind of in a box? Why can't I see it?
In a box, yeah, exactly. And that's the bit that fascinates me. And by the way, in the interest of time, because there's loads of other stuff that's on to cover off. So, I put it in there, but, if you're to take, there are other aspects and other elements of this as well, which it's just mystifying. So you take Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you know about Skinwalker Ranch.
This one I didn't know originally.
Oh, okay. So it's also known as Sherman Ranch. I think it's about 500 and something odd acres, located in Utah. It's reputed to be the site of not just UFO but paranormal type related activity. It's just a hive of weird stuff that goes on in there. And its name is taken from it's actually of Navajo origin, and there was something to do with that land linked to something vengeful shamans and what the tribes at that time used to do with land. They used to be able to curse land. They used to be able to bless land. There was all sorts of things that used to happen as part of ancient traditions. But this is, we're talking now about a whole. So we've talked about crashed saucers, right, and alien life forms in that saucer. Mm-hmm. We've talked about UFOs, actually, not just little orbs of light or just a little flying disc. We've talked about something that's like 6,000 feet across, with thousands of eyewitnesses moving slowly as well, which I also find really interesting. Not zipping by. Not suddenly shooting past and you go, oh, what the hell was that? Moving really slowly. So everybody got a good look at it. And then you layer on other things like what happens at Skinwalker Ranch, which is loads of UFO sightings, but also cattle mutilations. So you know about cattle mutilations where it's all surgically done. And basically the wounds immediately cauterized. There's no blood anywhere.
Jedis.
And specific organs.
It was the Sith. It was the Sith.
Yeah.
It was a lightsaber.
It's a lightsaber. I mean, literally like a lightsaber. That's exactly it. And you think, what? So what is that all about?
And honestly, right, I jest about the lightsaber bit, but like it could be that. It could be someone's invented a lightsaber, and that the way they want to, they're hiding it in this ranch, and they and then they're using it, they're testing it on animals, right? And that's what the imagery that has. And I say it in jest, but like because there are things that we don't understand, and because there are things that we don't have access in the visible, honest, and open truth to, we can speculate and we can disprove and we can prove and we can take those things. You can take some things with a pinch of salt. You can ignore them, and without actually believing in aliens or stuff, you can definitely sort of question, right? But why can't I go and see this place, right? I'm not going to go over because I'm a scaredy cat, right? That's fine. I've got the backbone of an OAP. Everything is dust, and the interesting thoughts behind those kind of bits and pieces when something physical happens, right? There may be something very simple, right? Somebody's a bit of a nutcase, but they've been happening. It's like they've been happening over many of years. So there's several nutcases. Now I know what the human race is like. That could entirely be the case, but there could also be something we don't understand. There could be something that's not of this world. There could be. It goes on and it goes on and on and on.
It does, and you know, and this is where I'll throw in the Rendlesham Forest incident as well, and this will be the sort of last UFO example that I give, which will then lead me on to my next question and my next point, I suppose. So, Rendlesham Forest incident. Do you know about that one?
No, this one I don't.
Okay, so this is it was so significant. It's been known as the UK Roswell, basically, and this one was incredible. So. You've got UFO sightings in Suffolk, so Rendlesham Forest, where you're basically it's an RAF base, but it's also it was at that time also being used by the United States Air Force, and there were purportedly nuclear missiles as well on site. Or there was some connection. There was some connection. I don't know if there were missiles on site, but there was some connection with because that's another thing, by the way. Apparently, the majority of UFO sightings seem to take place around military sites, which are holding nuclear weapons and nuclear material.
Yeah. And the other one is also a lot of Americans, right? And and you know, this is where my septic kicked in. It's like, okay, what are our government hiding if they find that promoting perhaps alien conspiracy theories a better option than telling the truth?
Right, exactly. So that's the crux of it. So that's exactly it. So you've got this situation where you've got. I mean, it's a highly guarded, maximum security Air Force base, right? And you've got one of the. In fact, there were two people. One of them, a gentleman by the name of I think it was John Burroughs, and who. Or was it Peniston? I can't remember. But basically, one of the RAF base security actually saw the UFO, actually touched it, and quickly noted stuff in his notebook on the hieroglyphics that he saw, the symbols that he saw on the side of the UFO. Actually, you can go to Rendlesham, and they've actually gone and built a little monument with the symbols that Peniston saw. That he wrote in his notebook. And Peniston was apparently, he said he was looking at this UFO, he was touching it, examining it, writing things in his notebook. He's looking at the UFO, he's making notes, and he's jotting all this stuff down. And it, over the course of 45 minutes, he did this on a base, on an RAF base, where, like, if you and I were to try and sneak in there, we would have rifles pointed on us within literally a matter of minutes. But this UFO has managed to go in there, land. It's completely evaded all of the detection systems. And this goes back to the point, Dom, and this is why I wanted to have this discussion, because I find it fascinating. To your point, why try and debunk it with any kind of story, which actually just makes things worse, when really what we're talking about is unidentified aerial phenomena that are a potential national security threat, and they need to be treated that way. That's a bit that I find absolutely.
It could be a ship from an enemy state on Earth. It could be a ship from outer space. It could be anything, right? And that's where I don't limit myself in terms of like how to phrase it. You get some people that are extreme scientists. Until it's proven, I won't believe in it. Sort of. I don't. It didn't happen, right? I need to have seen it with my own eyes. Things like that. And I'm like, I mean, there's this whole thing around like people go, "Oh, gravity doesn't exist." Well, it does, because it does a thing, right? I'm here, gravity, right? Great. But also, I just did a quick. Reason why I'm looking to the right is because I have a second screen where I
Yeah, no, it's,
for
yeah.
the watchers and for yourself, Jerry. As I'm having a quick kind of read because I'd heard of Roswell, I'd heard of Phoenix, I hadn't heard of the Skinwalker or Rendlesham.
Rendlesham Forest.
Um,
Yeah.
and there was other things like they found impressions in the ground and they measured their radioactivity and they were different, right? And that's where I go. Right, if somebody said to me that was an alien, I'd go, well, sort of yes, because we don't necessarily understand it. Like I said, I'm happy with unidentified. Great. But it's all this cover up. It's all cover up. It's like, why? Why make it more complicated? I don't get it. I don't understand that cover up.
And to kind of burrito this, this whole UFO
food puns.
There you go. But wrapping up the UFO bit before we then move on to the other bit, which actually, nobody's going to be able to debunk. I mean, I'm going to tell stories which, this is stuff I've experienced, but then I've got theories as well on that. But moving away from the UFO, like I say, UFO topic, we could talk about it for days. Right? We could just look at different examples. I thought I'd cover different things. Like I wanted to cover somebody that's actually touched UFO, made notes on it. You've got crash site, you've got something with it, you've got thousands of witnesses. The whole thing around the reason why I didn't talk about people that claim to have been abducted by aliens is because that's a whole different area then. And then you can start delving into the whole area of psychology. So that's, however, there are people that say that, that were abducted by aliens, but then they actually found like little implants, for example, unidentified little implants in like their knee or behind their ear, or it's like, what the hell is that? And it's like showing up on X-rays. So the fundamental question to burrito this bit is, I mean, clearly the government are trying to cover this up because they're probably thinking, right, well, the last thing we want to do is say, oh, by the way, so we've had an unidentified flying object that managed to breach all of our security, get into a nuclear missile base, an American nuclear missile base, and we didn't know what it is. We couldn't catch it. We couldn't identify it. We couldn't chase it or track it on radar. It's completely evaded everything. And they're probably thinking, well, if we were to say that to the public, they would say, well, that's not very reassuring. So we have to say something else to try and debunk it and basically make light of it, because actually we can't explain it. The reality is the government does take this very, very seriously, but not outwardly. Yes. Outwardly, they're like, it's little green men. Inwardly, they're thinking, what the fringe? This thing's just got into this base. I'm not happy about that. Exactly. 45 minutes, and there's nothing we could do about it. And UFOs that have deactivated nuclear missile systems whilst they've been there. And then once they left it's all come back online. So,
and even if you don't believe, right? So even if the folks listening to this don't believe in like that aliens are doing that, there's still the element of like that cover up. If it happens to be like another human craft that managed to do that, right? You're a bit like, you're suddenly like, well, it's still unidentified.
It's still unidentified, but what's caused it?
Yeah. And you're like, that's fine. And I think, you can kind of sort of side with the government in some respects, right? And I never thought I'd say this, but you're right. You said a very key word about not wanting to cause panic. But humans are both significantly stupider than you give them credit for, and a lot more intelligent than you give them credit for. Like generally, common sense within humans is generally lacking. I never understood why it's called common sense, because it's not very common at all. But but people will. There are clever people out there. They can they can do maths and they can do physics and they can they can see things and witness things and make calculations, etc., and disprove, prove what has happened. And by debunking it, and because then you start enacting onto the psyche of that like lack of like visibility, truth, and trust. And when you have lack of that, people are going to put a spotlight on it, right? If you're open and go, yeah, something landed, we don't know what it was, right? It evaded us, and we're currently investigating, but we have no conclusions. Most people would be like, oh, okay, fine. And within about 6 months, they'd be like, well, you're still investigating. You may not have got any conclusions, but so be it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not like it's. It's not like it's actually caused harm, if you know what I mean. It's not like it's actually set off a nuclear bomb in the middle of, in the middle of the forest. That people are like, we want blood, sort of thing. It's
so that leads me on to the other facet of this, which is, do you think that there's something that they know that they're absolutely shit scared to tell people because they're thinking, well, we have a theory on this, but if we were to tell people our theory, they literally would not be able to handle it? Because if they genuinely really didn't have a Scooby, why wouldn't you just go, honestly, we don't know, we've got to investigate this, and actually come up with some ideas of, actually, we suspect, for example, it could be super advanced Russian or Chinese technology, or technology from any other country. You can pick on Canadians, say something maybe the Canadians are doing, which they haven't told us about, or the Belgians.
Well, they don't even need to name a company. A country. They can just go.
Or a country. They could just say, look, we think this is our theory. We think it's man-made. But the fact they're not even going to any trouble to try and explain this, and they're debunking it with some really weak theories, and actually making light of it, does beg the question: do they know something that they're thinking? Well, we just can't. We're just going to have to keep doing what we're doing, because if we deviate from our course, people are going to think we're going to look like Muppets, and actually we're going to just cause panic. Because if we were to come out and say, look, actually, in all seriousness, we do think this is something that's not of this earth, and people will go, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? And then that will just start the whole chain of events of like, well, now you're admitting that this is your official theory. So that's a bit disconcerting. I wonder if there is that.
It's why I can understand again why they get put between a rock and a hard place. It's like, do we say something, and then somebody cleverer comes along and goes, yeah, but I can prove that it's not that, right? Or do I say nothing, right, on the extreme end, or do I say the truth, complete truth, let's say, and then everybody panics, and then you've got the middle ground, which is like, do I say nothing, right?
Yeah,
You're between a rock, a hard place, and something. I can't think of another coffin. Out of the fire into the frying pan. All of those.
All of the above.
Metaphors, whatever you wish to call them, and it's interesting. It's a really kind of point to kind of really delve into and really understand, like, this again, the psyche of humans, the psyche of like how stuff works. Some people will panic, right? You're based upon me personally, like I said, because it's not physically done something to me, right? It's not physically gone, yes, we've done this, it's not physically blown up my house, right? Less worried, right? It's a very selfish trait, but but I also know that there are things out there that or the way that I believe is there are stuff that I just will not understand. There is a limited brain capacity that I can hold. It's about a Pentium 2, but we won't go into that detail. The other point, I think, if you take, like, being the open and honest, truthful bit, for me, though, is where you could go, yeah, we don't know, we need some help. And you'll find people that would be like, yeah, well, they'd be like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's figure it out. And there'll be some people that will panic, but you can go, and it's about maintaining that, like, safety net, isn't it? It's about sort of going, we don't understand, but we're going to fully investigate it. We need some help. We want to reassure you that we don't believe it's dangerous. That's the type of line that I would expect. That's the way that I would be anyway.
So you mean bring people with you on the
exactly.
change? What a novel idea!
What a novel idea! I wonder what group I'm part of at work, right? And it's that balance between open-mindedness, honesty, and truthfulness that I think people will be able to handle it better than you think, and those that can't can need to be brought on a journey with you, and coddled, I think is the term, isn't it?
I agree. But then to get to the last point from me on this, to get and I'll end on the jovial point. I'm kind of glad that they haven't sort of officially said anything that's going to cause any kind of alarm, because the first thing that will happen is everybody, in a state of panic, will go and buy bog roll. So we'll be back to the same bloody situation we were back to 2 years ago. And it's like, oh, there's a virus. Oh, now I can't get pasta or bog roll or hand sanitizer. And we'll go down the same route again. Yeah, we think it's alien technology. Margaret, get in the car. We're going to Aldi. We're buying up all of their bog roll.
I did.
Why? I don't know.
See a slight tangent. I did see an Ask Reddit post the other day that and it was only from about 2 weeks ago, that literally said, those that bought loads of bog roll at the beginning of the pandemic, have you used it all by now? I couldn't. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
and those are the people that people panicking is quite a. It's a funny thing because like I didn't, right? I'd never had. I didn't understand it. And don't get me wrong, I was definitely miffed when I'd go into a shop and be like, I can't get pasta, right? I need some food, right? And you can't get this food, and you can't get that food. But there was food there, right? You fundamentally could get it, and you've never been at the stage where that. And I believe that, even though I quite often say, the UK and the US aren't really a first world country at the moment because of the way that we are currently governed and the way that the human psyche works in our two countries. We've gone beyond the point of the democracy at the moment, and it's pure inability to work together results in these conflicts. And but I still believe that, at least it's to some degree, we won't get, without the whole world being like it, we won't get as an individual country like so overwhelmed, panicky that we wouldn't be able to survive, right? And not in a sense that the whole world would have to be like it, I think, versus like if it was just the UK, right? If this incident just causes panic in the UK, guess what? I'd be like, all right, fine, I'm moving to France, right? Those types of things.
Because if you remember this time last year, literally almost a year ago to the day, and I remember this because it was coming up to my daughter's birthday, you had some politician, some numpty went and hinted that there was a petrol shortage, and then we had a whole month, right? And then we had a whole month of everybody just acting like a complete and utter arse. I mean, there were people queuing. I can feel my blood pressure increasing. People queuing up for like an hour and 45 minutes to get £3.80 worth of
which was about to...
which actually happened. Which makes you think, there's literally nothing going on behind those eyes. The people that did that. So I just kind of, it's fascinating that, there's got to be some people out there that are thinking, we need to study this. We need to understand how people would respond, and that there must be a study of humankind's reaction to major events and things, and how they can be, how you can control panic and stop that from bubbling up. And anyway, I found the whole thing fascinating. That was
this is the interesting thing, right? Because we've discussed stuff that are outside the human psyche today. Like we've discussed, like we don't understand a lot about the ocean. We don't understand like a lot outside of our planet, right? Because especially when the universe is ever expanding. I still think we don't understand enough about ourselves. We don't understand enough how we work, how we interpret panic, how we interpret like democracy and all these like rules and regulations, especially like now at the moment where a lot of the way to phrase it is right-winged ideas, but a lot of selfish ideas within the human, within humanity seem to be bubbling to the surface across the globe. Right? You take, for example, right, generally the conservatives here are very right-winged. Right, they believe in like they have this like one man and it's all and not working together and type thing. It's like in a very basic selfish sense, right? We didn't, Brexit. We didn't need to be part of Europe, so we can do it all on our own, right? Like the way that they've the recent tax cuts that they've just announced is very much like, yes, they they help, they help everyone. No, they don't. If people help themselves, it helps them. It doesn't help everyone. We don't seem to look after the people that are less fortunate than us. It's a very selfish matter. You take America. Okay, Democrats are currently in with Joe Biden, but like you've got people like the governor of Texas, I can never remember his name, who's a terrible, terrible man, by the way, right?
Yeah.
All the thing about abortions, like cutting off abortions, that's not about people being like pro-life and being like, I want to save as many things as it wants, because if they needed an abortion, they would still have an abortion. It's purely a selfish act to instill a bunch of beliefs that they believe in on other people until it affects them. And all what else is going on is about the headscarves. I've got the name off the top of my head, right?
Yes.
And ironically, people like 5-10 years ago were fighting to be able to wear headscarves in Western-based countries, right? And now they're fighting in Iran. I want to say, am I got that right? I think I got that right.
Yeah,
to,
it is. Yeah,
to be able to remove their headscarves. And it's this oppression. This oppression seems to be bubbling up to the surface within. We want to oppress stuff, right? We want to stop people having the choice about whether they wear a headscarf or not. We want to stop people having a choice on whether they want to have an abortion or not. We want to stop people Brexit. We want to stop people having a choice whether they want to be a UK, whether they can travel into the Europe or not. We want to stop people having a choice about whether the NHS service. It's all about limiting choices, because people believe that the one way to protect the human psyche is to limit the options at the moment. That and Sweden is the same, right? And I always think the Scandinavian countries generally on a little bit more higher pedestal because they have it right. But Sweden's most recent general election, right wing made massive gains over the Socialist Party, massive gains, right? And it was seen as like some sort of victory, and you're a bit like, yeah, but when you actually look at their policies, it's about that oppression. And it comes back to I'm going to loop it back to this, I promise. This is another form of it. It is either the military or the government are repressing the human's ability to make a choice. Whether they make a choice on whether the choice is to panic, whether the choice is to go, okay, you don't know what it is, I'm very intelligent and I have a big interest in it, I can offer my services. Or whether you have a choice of just go, that's great, not worried about it, you crack on with it. And by oppressing and changing, it's perhaps a more media based like outlet to or not media, a bit more like sort of like left field option onto sort of oppress. And that's kind of the way I believe things to be at the moment. It's that oppression. Now, yes, I believe that there are things that I will never understand, but I want to be able to make the choice on whether I want to actively search for the things that I will never be able to understand and not have that limited. I don't like the glass ceiling. I've ranted a bit there, and I hope that kind of
it's kind of
in a bit of a spaghetti way.
Well, no, it's look. I think off the back of what you've just said, I think you're absolutely right, and it does worry me, because it does feel to me as well like it's a level of control. You wanted to control what information you give to people, so it's about exerting that level of control. All I will say is, if there's anybody from any government institution listening to this, if you could just do a study on why people just rush out and buy bog roll at the sign of panicking about anything, that would be much appreciated. Yes, and publish your findings. Don't just keep it to yourself. So, moving swiftly on to spirits and the afterlife. So, again, I'm going to give this I'm going to make it very high level, because otherwise it gets deep. It's actually quite an emotive topic for me, because it's stuff that I've
and we've heard some of your stories before in this podcast, April last year, if anyone wants to go back and listen.
Yes, exactly that. Thank you, Dom. And so I'll give it very just headline level, right? So this is stuff that I've experienced. I've been at a friend's house and I felt a presence behind me, funnily enough, as I was spending a penny in their upstairs bathroom. And my friend said, I mean, it's completely unprompted, so I didn't have a Scooby, but I remember thinking, whoa, it feels, so the bathroom's gone really cold, and it literally feels like there's somebody standing behind me. I don't actually like this. So I need to just finish peeing, and I just need to wash my hands and go downstairs, which I did. I almost fell down the stairs, almost like ended up sliding down the stairs because I was trying to control my emotions as I was started walking down the stairs, but I couldn't wait to get away because I was thinking, I don't know what just happened. So it was like a controlled panic, and I almost ended up sliding down the stairs. I've had a situation where I. You see, and this is where I don't know whether to say it or not because it involves my daughter. But let's just say she was very, very young, and a great uncle of my wife's communicated with her, and she was tiny. But she was repeating what this great.
And there's
uncle was saying.
there's loads of stories on Reddit about this, about children, and because they have no perception of certain fears, right, at a young age, right? You don't have that perception that man is scary, right? And to be fair, and that's, we could go into the psyche behind like racism and sexism in that thing, like, and how environmental factors influence us into going, that's scary. Like, but why is that scary? What has taught us that to be scary? The media, this, that, and the other. But yes, generally as children, they don't have that environmental influence. So when something, and I'm just going to say something happens, right? And you hear about it all the time, simple as, a child going, oh yeah, there was this person in my bedroom, and they accurately describe a dead or they would never have met a dead or a long lost relative, right? And in excruciating detail, and you just go, that's a bit weird. Can't explain it. Fine.
Yeah. So, and I've had a situation where a friend passed away, and then gone to their funeral, and then that night, literally, so we've got one of these big fern plants in our TV room, with these huge branches, these big ferns that sits under the TV, and all of a sudden those ferns moved as if somebody had literally just brushed past them, but not just gently brushed past them. I'm talking about like, literally like you've gone through them.
You get that.
Just, and you're like, what? And there's other things. I mean, the list goes on. It's just, which I also find quite fascinating. Like, how come I've experienced so many things.
It's very interesting because I have experienced none, right? And I think it's very similar to how to put this. So we were doing a bit about diversity and inclusivity, and we had a very interesting kind of discussion about like where your background is from, right? And Jerry has a fascinating background, and it's up to him whether he wants to go into that at some point, whether it's this podcast, whether it's probably a future podcast if you wanted to, right? And I step back and I look at myself and I go, like, I'm super privileged. I'm white. I'm from an upper class family. I've got plenty of money, right? I'm male. I'm over 6 foot, right? So I have that height, the height thing as well. Like, there's loads of stuff that I'm really privileged for. And I sort of said, I don't really then have like I don't really feel I can contribute to the conversation in the same way, right? And you're almost, I was almost sat there, and this is a bit of a thing, is just to say, like, I can't contribute in the way that people can. And this is why I think this is really good, because I've never experienced any of this, right? I'm fairly boring. There's no other way to put it, right?
Don't go Babs the chicken
it's
on
right
me.
Boring, right? I am. That's exactly it. I am Babs the chicken, right? I've not done anything particularly exciting, right? Like, ever. I don't have these extreme festival stories. And I'm okay with this, right? To a certain extent. Like, I try and live my life as stress-free as possible. But if there's a God out there, by Jesus, is he testing me this year? The point being, I think I read all these stories, and some of them I'm skeptical of, because there's very clearly, okay, that one's a bit weird. But there are things that I just go, like I said, because I've not experienced it, I fundamentally cannot disprove it, because I believe that there are things that I won't understand.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I describe my experiences now. I've had so many of them that I can talk about them matter of factly now. And I've had time to process
Yeah.
things as well, right? So if something happened last night, I'd be explaining it, relaying it to you in a completely different way. But I've had time to process all of this thing. So here's a theory, and this is the angle that I wanted to go on for this section, which is, so there are a number of things here. And again, when you do a lot of research on this, there's a lot of focus, like with UFOs, there's a lot of focus on the what, but not the why. So one of the theories is, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is, consciousness it's an energy, right? Consciousness is a form of energy. It takes energy to have consciousness. When your physical being dies, and I say dies in inverted commas because
The vessel which our brain is,
you've got the vessel, the vessel
works.
that's holding your consciousness, but energy can't be destroyed. Energy can only get transferred. So if you to take a look at all the fundamentals, it's a fundamental law of physics. Energy gets dissipated, it gets transferred, but it doesn't get destroyed. So that consciousness, which is energy, where does that go? Does it go somewhere where it can then exist in a different plane? If that energy can't be destroyed, but it can sort of remain as a hull, can you sort of almost go a bit Dr. Manhattan from it on from The Watchmen, right? But is it something like that? Oh, amazing film. But the concept of that,
top 10.
Oh, it is amazing.
Yeah.
But what else would cause that? For example, that fern, or is it because that consciousness still exists in a form?
Well, what's interesting, right, is I'm just trying to think of if I approach it from like my my skeptical science brain, right, that side of me. I have to admit, like, I know I deem myself reasonably academically intelligent, right? Street smarts don't exist, right? But my point being is, like, I can fundamentally know, like, the body degrades, whether through illness, injury, old age, right? But like, this is gonna sound a really far-fetched question, but I will loop it in. What is old age? Right? Because old age is that your body just getting to the point where it can no longer handle, or no longer, okay, here comes the matrix theory, which we love. It can no longer power the brain to actively keep energy to form life. Right? Now, then you have to sort of go, yeah, but what is life? Like, what is the life force? What is the thing that makes me animated? What is the thing that makes me? And there's going to be people that's going to be like, there must be something about electrons, but how does that actually then translate to me being sat here and speaking about these things? This is where I fundamentally think we can't understand it, because then you're talking about the brain is having a thought about itself. We are the only people that can have a thought about a thought. I have a thought to have a cheese sandwich. Interesting. Why do I want a cheese sandwich today? Etc. Now that means that, like, that you're right, because energy can't be destroyed. When your body runs out of energy, what happens to it? Like, where does it go? Because, or is it based upon something that we don't understand that does run out, which it could be?
I've got a theory on that.
And to your point specifically about, like, the energy of, like, consciousness, I haven't got Scooby-Doo, right? And this is me being open and honest. I genuinely don't know. Like people go, oh, the afterlife could be, right, you go to heaven, you go to hell, right? If you're a good or a bad person, I'm screwed.
I'm right behind you.
Yeah. Right. The afterlife, like, you form something else, right? There's another world to go to. Is that in the same universe? Is that in a parallel universe? Does it have the same matrix bound consciousness that we've come to kind of discuss in this podcast before, which I kind of sort of support and believe in the way that it goes, right? do you get reincarnated as right? And what does that mean? Do you have memories from your previous life? Is that what deja vu is? Do you have is it the same life? Do you relive it perhaps with like just more experience, which would be great, by the way, like level up
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, Groundhog Day, but a life in terms of
Yeah.
Groundhog Day, so I can make different decisions. I can those types of
Sliding
things.
doors.
You know, is it something that does something happen that's so extreme and so like different that actually in this current form we cannot process and do it? I don't know. That's those are my thoughts.
What do you mean you don't know? I was waiting for a definitive answer.
I feel like that computer.
I'm hanging up now.
I feel like that the computer from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? 42.
42. Yeah, I want a 42 kind of answer. Yeah, look, So you also mentioned something that you touched upon, which again is also fascinating, and it's something that's fundamental in my thinking around this, which is you mentioned about reincarnation. So I'm not going to go into details. I just implore everybody that's listening to this or watching this to look up the case study of somebody called James Leininger. So that's Leininger. Now, James, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, but Leininger, he was a young boy, and I think he was as young as 3, and he started making drawings of like airplanes on fire, and airplanes being shot at, and he was having really bad dreams. And then as he was getting older, he was talking about names of he was just screaming out random people's names, and he was describing this. What basically what he was describing was an incident of him as a pilot being shot down. And look, this story is long. This story is deep, worth looking into. I'm not going to go into all the details. I'll give you the headline that basically he was an absolute reincarnation of a fighter pilot that was shot down in the Second World War. And actually, when they were, I think it was they were trying to take one of the islands. I wouldn't say I could say Iwo Jima, which is an obvious one. I don't think it even was Iwo Jima, but it was somewhere. Say this pilot died. This kid basically is just reenacting and reliving that one scene. But it's fascinating because this kid ended up being introduced to the sister of the person that died many years later. I mean, we're talking like this. So this pilot that was killed was in his 20s, early 20s. I think he might have even been just 21, 22. So this little kid's describing details about aircraft that they used to fly in the Second World War. You know, for example, one of the quirks of Vought Corsair.
Yeah.
And how that feels when it takes off. And the parents, who are very Christian, was sort of like, they couldn't handle it. They're thinking, what the hell? What the fringe is going on? What is going on with our child? It was actually horrific to watch. The drawings that he did, and he just kept reliving this thing. The bit that absolutely floored me was when this kid, when I think at that point he was 6 or 7, was introduced to the sister of this person that died, that was shot down. And she was like in her late 70s or early 80s at that point. I think she was in her 80s at that point. And was having a conversation with her about stuff that only her and her brother knew about. And there was something to do with a portrait or something. And she said, and this kid said, "Oh, do you remember that painting?" And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "Have you still got it?" And she said, "Yeah, it's in the loft." She said, "No one's ever seen it. No one knows about that." And but he was having this conversation with her because in fact, he was basically her brother, but in the form of this child. And you think, what? And it's fascinating.
And it's interesting, like, you know, this skeptical side of me, like, just, you know, goes, it, you know, could be Well, no, I don't believe in coincidences. Right? Coincidences are always things happen for a reason. I've got two thoughts on it. Like just very quickly scanning the case study. Right, the case study ends with that there's an unreasonable amount of evidence to give the conclusion that there is the potential for reincarnation to exist. Now, that's not me going, yes, reincarnation exists, because I don't know, right? Again, this comes back to there are things that we will never understand. You can't deny like what is happening and stuff like that, because the alternative that it gives in the case study is psychic, which I think is less plausible. Because we can harp back to our original, and even if it was, why that person?
Yeah.
Right. That
Yeah.
again, the whys, the why. We can harp back to our first podcast when we discussed like, is Keanu Reeves immortal? And we saw all those portraits of him, and it's like, well, okay, but is actually that reincarnation? If we activated maybe perhaps a certain specific part of Keanu Reeves' memory, or might, and activated a certain part of his consciousness, would he be able to have memories of the past lives where people think that he's actually immortal? Those types of things. What's interesting is I wonder if what happens to consciousness depends on what you believe in. Right? Did James's past life believe in reincarnation and therefore got reincarnated? Which is why it's not as because otherwise all of us would be having these thoughts, wouldn't we? And it's not as well known because only X% of the world believe in reincarnation.
Good question.
And if people believe they get to heaven and hell, maybe they get to heaven and hell. Maybe that's the way that it goes about. And Christianity is on a thing here, right? It's all those thoughts, and if you don't believe in anything, what happens then? Is it spin the wheel, right? Is it spin the wheel?
But then what happens to that energy? That everyone's conscious. Everyone that's alive is conscious. That energy's there. So what happens to that? There was something I was reading up about this. There are other case studies as well, which are fascinating. But that one in particular had the most evidence, documented evidence as well, and witnesses. Like I say, I'm not going to go into all the details of it. There was another case that I read about, which is also fascinating, similar kind of thing. And the parents were a bit more open-minded. And actually the mother ended up having, well, I say that, the father wasn't. So the father was a policeman in this other case. But the mother absolutely believed the child because the stuff that this child was coming out with and the way that this child was speaking, which was very grown up, she's like, okay, he can't be making this stuff up. And she asked him one day, they were talking about reincarnation. And so she ended up having this very, very adult conversation with him. And she said, but basically, do you believe in it? And he said, well, look, let me tell you something. He said, so he was describing himself as consciousness, as a spirit, whatever you want to call it. But he said, yeah, when you were pregnant, I decided to inhabit the baby, basically, that you were the child that you were carrying. And I chose both of you because you seemed like really nice people, and I knew I'd had a troubled life, and I knew you'd look after me. He's this kid. He's like 8 years old, and he's saying this to his mum.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's like, "What the fringe?
Yeah, where does it come from?
Where do you go from that? Where does it come from?" He said he chose them. He said, you seemed like really nice people, and you seemed like the people that would support me because I had a troubled life.
Yes. So
and I had to come back to inhabit another body, and I wanted you as my parents.
So is that reincarnation, or is that somebody's belief that when you die you become a spirit, and then as a spirit you can do X, Y, Z? And this is why I asked that question, like, does what you believe in become reality?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, and where I kind of, not my skeptical side of things, but my, like, it's not a priority for me to think about. Nobody will be able to accurately tell us because you can't interview someone when they're dead, right? And that's the beauty of it. The mystery and the fact that I don't know, I think, is just a thing sometimes to just go, hey, you can never find out about this. At least at the moment, in terms of my consciousness and my understanding and my intelligence, you can't find out about that. And that's why generally maybe I haven't researched this as much as yourself, or I've not had maybe as many events, shall we say, because I'm satisfied with that. It's that.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, exactly, and
Yeah,
that's I think and that's why I love the human psyche, because I love that curiosity. Right, the things that I'm curious about is like, what makes that person think like that? What makes this government act like this? What makes this country want to go to war here? What makes that? What's the? And generally, it's the same thing. It's like greed, right?
Money.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's money. Give me more, right? Or some kind of power, right? Power. And generally, what happens like afterwards to those things is not. It's not necessarily a priority in terms of like, oh my God, I must understand every single little detail, because I understand that there's some things I can't. And there's so much about the world, I think, that does that. When we go back and talk about the aliens, as their life forms that are bigger and better than me. Yeah, probably. There's humans that are bigger than better than me, right? Are they going to be more intelligent, less intelligent? Yeah, probably. Like, it's just a yes, and it's the same with the other question, and that's the key for me, is that sometimes it's just yes, and until somebody says what it is, if it's a mystery, it's a mystery.
Yeah, it's just I still want those answers. I'm fascinated by it because I think it's because I've experienced things and I've just thought, hang about, whoa, why did that happen? How did that happen? I just, and I still to this day can't explain it. There's one thing. So the last point that I was going to make on this topic was, there is a theory about, we live in 3 dimensions. Actually, they say, actually, if you want to take time into consideration, that's a 4th dimension. So if you look at this scientifically and break it down scientifically, so you've got your 3 dimensions, which are effectively like the axes of life that we know about. You've got length, width, depth, in our universe. The 4th dimension is time. So scientists believe that's the 4th dimension that governs all the properties of all known matter at any given point. And then you start getting into this. By the way, I'm reading off some notes. I know nothing about this area, but superstring theory.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 5th.
I've just got the scene from The Big Bang Theory where Penny comes in and she goes, and they all go, "Where were you?" And she goes, "Oh, I was just helping Sheldon figure out string theory."
Yeah,
and it's like, that's not possible. Well, apparently it is with knots.
Well, there you go. So that's about as far as it goes with me, because honestly I struggle to get my head around a lot of this. But so superstring theory, that talks about a 5th and 6th dimensions, which apparently where the notion of possible worlds arise. So if we could see on through to the 5th dimension, we would see a world slightly different from our own. This is what you talked about as well. That would give us a means of measuring that similarity and differences between our world and other possible ones. Apparently in the 6th dimension, we would see a plane of possible worlds where we could compare and position all the possible universes that start with the same initial conditions as this one. Right?
Yeah.
And in theory, if you could master the 5th and 6th dimensions, you could travel back in time or go to different futures, apparently. In the 7th dimension, you have access to possible worlds that start with different initial conditions. So whereas in the 5th and 6th, the initial conditions were the same, the subsequent actions were different. Here, in this dimension, everything is different from the very beginning of time. The 8th dimension gives us a plane of such possible universe histories, each of which begins with a different initial condition. I mean, this is just already blowing my mind. Then you think, oh, come on, you can't go any further than that. Well, apparently you can. There's a 9th dimension where you can compare all the possible universe histories, starting with all the different possible laws of physics and initial conditions. And then in the final dimension, the 10th dimension, we arrive at the point in which everything is possible and imaginable, which is covered. And beyond this, like, nothing can be imagined by us lowly mortals. Yeah. Which makes that a natural limitation to that 10th dimension. But I wonder if one of the theories is, when we talk about the consciousness as energy, does that end up in another? And by the way, that dimension, in the same way that, if you take a look at your room, so this is where it's going to get a bit Stranger Things, right? So you look at your room and you think, okay, everything's in 3D. You've got your laptop in front of you. You're a certain distance from that. There's a width to your room and there's a height. No, what if there's a dimension that you don't know about that's literally just sitting above your ceiling, but you can't see it, or it's just beneath your feet? So this is a bit I mean about Stranger Things, almost like the upside down.
Upside down, yeah.
So is there something, for example, in a dimension that could be a lot closer than you think? You just can't experience it. You haven't got the ability. You and I haven't. Why am I picking on you? It's not like, I can experience this, Dom, and you're the only one that can't. As in, when I say you, I'm talking about the royal you. Like we can't experience it, right? So does your consciousness go to one of those dimensions?
Yeah.
And then it can pierce its way through when it wants to or needs to.
Yeah,
which then links in with the whole it explains then all of the experiences that I've had. It explains that whole thing about reincarnation of that kid's basically saying to his mum, he's 7, 8 years old, saying, "Yeah, I chose you and Dad. You seem like nice parents." So it's you've got this consciousness operating in this dimension that's looking around, going, "Well, I want to go back to that world." And I want to go back to that state.
It's this is I think the beautiful thing about this is also, consciousness is obviously built up on energy, and energy is unpredictable, right? To a certain extent, right? It does weird things.
Unless you're Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, unless you're Dr. Manhattan, of course.
And then you can control it.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, deja vu is always one of the phenomenons that you kind of come to and you kind of go, yeah, but why do we experience deja vu? Is it, and it could be as pure as simple as your brain just firing off the wrong electrode and going, yeah, we've experienced this before, when it hasn't.
Yeah.
That's true. And, when you go to and all of this could just be, all of our speculating, because we can't prove anything. We can't disprove anything. All of those things, they could be bugs in the human code. I do like my matrix theory.
Matrix.
What I think, and the string theory kind of element side of things, yes, absolutely, this goes into parallel universes and the same starting point but different conditions, different starting point, same conditions. You've got those 4 kind of things, and obviously different conditions. There's an infinite possibility of those different conditions. There's an infinite possibility of those starting positions.
On that, I'm really sorry to interrupt, because otherwise I'll forget. Which if you then, when you go into the superstring theory, which I was reading about and the build up to this, which then explains why you can have the same matter, so the same electron appearing in 2 different places at the same time, but it's exactly the same electron, for example, or the same element. Sorry.
Yeah.
Which, right?
And it's also
we've run tests and we've proved that, by the way.
Yeah,
mad.
Absolutely. Dark matter and I've been
crazy.
To the oh god, what's it called?
Legoland.
No, I've been to Legoland for years.
Thought Park.
What's it called? Hadron Collider.
Oh, you've been there?
I've been there.
Wow.
I've been to Geneva and I've seen the Hadron Collider. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Physics trip, 2013.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It was good. I had a beard then as well, but it was I was 17, so it didn't look like this. Let's just say.
Was it more Guy Fawkes?
It was
Guido Fawkes.
Yeah, it's more like Guido Fawkes, I know.
Guido Fawkes. Yeah.
But I'm going to probably take this a step further, and I don't know if it's going to blow your mind. Do you think there's something that's then governing those infinite universes?
I haven't had time to think about this. No. I'm answering that with my instinct. I would say no, because I think that we're talking about things which are way beyond our control.
I don't think we can understand that, right? And I'll use a media example, right? For example, so there's kind of two popular series that have done now multiverse stuff. You've obviously got Marvel, where they produce different like, because you've got like different variants of Earth. So the current existing Marvel is on Earth 313, and then you have Doctor Strange, which you haven't spoil it if you haven't seen it. Spoiler alert! But there's a character that can go across universes, right? And the whole point is then Wanda is trying to get her children from a different universe so she can have children in this universe. Is basically what she wants, because that's what she wants to be, right? Great, it's a really good film. And really encourage you to watch. But it's like there is this element of within the Marvel universe, if you watch What If, about something that governs those universes. And there's a guy called the Watcher, right? And his purpose is to watch the universe, that thing. And in What If, at some point, again, spoiler alert for What If, Ultron becomes powerful enough to break out of those universes, that he then challenges the Watcher. And that to me is where this superstring theory, I think, has more layers than just the 10. Because I think that there's got to be something that then governs those infinite universes. And what happens if energy and conscious can escape those universes to be in the thing that controls all these universes? So that you can go down all these kind of, I'm not going to say rabbit holes, because that makes it sound like it's something that's that. I think it's something that genuinely the human brain cannot comprehend, right? And therefore we will do all these experiments to go, I think, prove that something else exists, but we will never be able to fundamentally prove that something else is there. The other TV show that does it, by the way, is Dragon Ball Super. They have 12 universes. And that's a bit more, because it's an anime, and perhaps maybe a similar audience, but maybe slightly younger. And the way that they do it is that you can see the similarities between the different places. So, but it does have evidence of the same starting point, different conditions. So in Universe 7, which is the one that you follow with Goku and Vegeta, you have the Saiyan planet has been destroyed. Right, in I want to say Universe 6, yes, it must be 6. The Saiyans are like, planet exists, and they are treated as, and they're in abundance, and they're treated like, and they aren't planet destroyers, which is what they are in the original Dragon Ball Z, original Dragon Ball manga. In this universe, they are planet saviors, right? And it's same starting point, different conditions, and you can see the differences between the two. Right, and then there are other planets that clearly have had different starting conditions, like Universe 12, for example, is just made up of these super powerful people that just have to constantly battle for survival, because every single planet from the beginning was desolate, whereas Universe 7 has been luscious planets and things like that, or varying planets. So it's not about fight for survival. There are people that don't need to be strong. A weak person can survive. So, and then they have the Grand Ruler, who is probably an 8-year-old child, but comedy value, it's really good. Grand Zeno is, he rules all these universes, and there's an element that he can delete a universe. And what they don't approach in the manga is that there are 12 universes that are in the Tournament of Power. But originally there were 16 universes. What happened to the other 4? And that's where it really then going to blow your mind, is that if I turn around and say, there are all these infinite universes, as you say, but what of the universes that didn't survive? What happened to their energy and their consciousness?
What a perfect way, perfect point to end.
Yes.
Burrito that.
I think I feel a bit bad. Jerry, what a wonderful topic and a wonderful podcast. Give me your final thoughts.
I wish I lived in a universe. So there's got to be a universe out there where pineapple pizzas, pineapple on pizza doesn't exist. And I just want to live on that. I just want to live on that universe.
Oh, man. You want everything else to be the same, though?
Yeah, everything else, absolutely. Well, and if there's no baked beans, but the chances, probabilities of that. So if I was in a universe where there were no baked beans, there's no such thing as baked beans, and nobody in their right minds would put pineapple on pizza, I think that's my kind of universe.
that would solve all of the problems of the world.
It would do. It would
Oh
do.
my God.
Sorry, just one of the things that I was going to say, and I'll leave you with this because, and it's one thing that I did actually want to end on. You kind of beat me to it because it was we normally do everything and then we do the final thought. So I'm kind of messing up this podcast.
No, it's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
I'm getting a bit off piste. So a lot of people listening to this will say, "Oh, okay, it's all I know, about the human imagination, and we've got enough. There's enough going on in TV and comics and radio shows and things over the past, 100 years and things for people to come up with all of these things around alien abductions and UFO sightings and things. But what this is the other thing that I wanted to just sort of finish off on, which was, do you know, in 74 BC, thousands of people witnessed a strange event, which is apparently they described it like a huge flame-like body that was silver in color, and it was shaped like a wine jar, and it interrupted two warring armies. And they said it was described as a spark that was seen to fall from a star and to grow as it approached the Earth. It eventually became as large as the moon before going back into the sky.
Interesting.
Right? 74 BC.
Mm.
And there were other UFO sightings, for example, in 16th century Europe. They talked about strange objects actually doing battle in the sky. That was apparently in the 1560s. People living in Germany and Switzerland reported this.
And
hundreds of years before flight. They're watching like things battling in the skies above them.
I think, and what's interesting, like obviously because, like I said, there's bits that I don't believe in. And you mentioned the human imagination. A lot of our stereotypes, imagination, and environmental factors are based upon things that actually happened. They have to be, right? People don't just make shit up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the human imagination is also amazing. And I just think it adds another dimension to everything that we've discussed.
Yes.
And that's what I think is beautiful in the mystery about it.
Nice. And now I'm going to really mix things up and say, Dom, final thoughts from you.
That's
there you go.
That's
right cool. Back at you.
Just because he's changed, just because Jerry planned this one, not me. This is brilliant.
That's it. I'm in control.
I think, like, obviously, everything that we've discussed today, these are our thoughts, these are our opinions, these are what our beliefs, our environmental factors that's caused us to grow, the things that we've experienced and stuff like that. I still maintain, like, I think the biggest important thing, I still think there's lessons to be learned from this. And the lesson is lack of open and honesty builds mistrust and judgment where it doesn't necessarily need to be. And the more open, honest, and kindness that we can put into this world that we currently are in, that's the thing, we still control the conditions of this world, and that we could absolutely change it for the better, regardless of third-party aliens, governments, consciousness interrupting that flow. We still have the power to manage the conditions. That's my final thoughts.
Oh, love it. Drop the mic. That's a drop the mic moment.
I'm not going to drop my mic because it's very expensive.
Yeah. Maybe just drop a biro or something.
I don't think I've got one in my house.
I'll drop it for you. Here you go.
I discovered this the other day. I don't actually have a pen in my house. I have a pencil. Pen.
Biros, yeah, I love biros. I almost collect them. I love them. I love writing with them. I just love the feeling. I always like twiddle them out with my thumb and finger when I'm on the phone, and I just love big biros. I'll get you a box of big biros. I'll send.
That was going to be my Christmas present this year.
Yeah. Big biros. Okay, thanks for that. Right,
folks. Thank you very much for watching, for listening, for paying attention. Please stay safe out there, and we will catch you on the next podcast.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Dom.